Last week, my team at Tin Man Games released our game, Neon Squad Tactics, onto the Oculus Quest. So, where do we go from here? Today's video, I'll be discussing the process that led to the release of Neon Squad Tactics, as well as a sort of post-mortem about the things that have happened after the game was released. And stick around to the end of the video to find out how you can score yourself a free copy of the game. If you don't know me, I'm Garnet, and I am a professional game developer and somewhat content creator on YouTube. I put out regular videos related to game development, so if you enjoy my content and want to support the channel, then the best way to do that is by interacting with the magical YouTube buttons. It really helps me out and pushes my video out to a greater audience. Our game, Neon Squad Tactics, is a tabletop-inspired turn-based tactics game set in a cyberpunk metropolis, available in the Quest 2, 3, and Pro. You play as the operator, projecting your conscience into a squad of miniatures, fighting your way through various missions on behalf of powerful corporations. Here's a quick snippet of the release trailer. Just try and find yourself singing that tune later, I know you will. Anyway, if you're a fan of role-playing tabletop games, then I highly recommend checking this out. The game is available for purchase through the Meta Store, which you can find the link for in the description of this video, and will soon be released on Steam, wink wink, so be sure to wishlist the game now. Neon Squad Tactics was released on Friday the 14th of June, and it has been roughly a week since release, but let me bring you up to full speed of the project timeline. I joined Tin Man Games 1 year ago, and this project has been my full-time job ever since. However, I actually joined the project at the tail end of development. This project has been in the works for a couple years before I entered, starting with a pitch deck, to writing up a game design document to flesh out concepts and ideas, to artists, 3D modelers, environment artists, and programmers joining the team and getting the game into a functional prototype for the vertical slice. When I joined the team, my role was generalist gameplay programmer, so I assisted in tool creation, optimization, and gameplay logic. The first milestone that I encountered was the alpha release, and when I joined the game there was a lot of changes still happening. In fact, the game was actually barely playable. There was some internal bug that prevented you from ever playing more than one mission at a time, and my first big task in the team was to track it down and get it fixed before alpha. During this stage, we were in the process of redesigning the entire interaction system, so how you control the miniatures in VR. We were also making new abilities, in fact hundreds of new abilities. We were implementing a working networked co-op mode, new characters, new models, new enemies, new lighting, you name it, everything in the game development pipeline, we were working on it. And eventually we got a build out which added in a lot of these changes for our alpha release, and fortunately the process was smooth, but there was still a lot of optimizations and changes that needed to happen before the next milestone being beta. Prior to the beta release, we knew that there was still some content lacking in the game, so my role during post-alpha was to start getting these in. The first thing we landed on was a reaction system. The framework that was built had supported this partially, but it wasn't working fully as intended. The revised reaction system basically allowed us to control the mission state as you were playing the mission. So maybe you made a specific move, or it turned to a specific round, or maybe you killed a specific enemy. We could create a reaction to that, like enemy reinforcements showing up partway through the level. The other thing we landed on was mission difficulties. Obviously being the easier the mission, the less rewards, but the harder the mission, the better rewards. So I assisted in the development of this feature that allowed the designer to create level difficulties that would allow for even more gameplay variation. During this phase of development, we also held a private playtest group to test some features and get some feedback on different areas of the game. This actually had a really positive response, and players really enjoyed the variations in gameplay as well as the difficulties. But of course we were still a long way from completion. But to get some outside perspective was really good for our morale, and we loved hearing the feedback. We finally got to the beta milestone, and again, very fortunately it was smooth sailing. Now, the final milestone before release was quality assurance. There were tons of aspects that we wanted to keep working on and improving, but we were nearing the planned release date. We needed to start looking into low-hanging fruit and remove some outstanding bugs in the game to ensure the smoothest gameplay experience. This phase was probably the toughest part of the project's timeline. It was basically 6 weeks of non-stop bug fixes, testing, optimizing, more fixing, and more testing. It felt like it was never going to end, but at the same time, that 6 weeks absolutely flew by, and before we knew it, it was release week. Neon Squad Tactics was released on Friday the 14th of June at 3 AM Australian Eastern Standard Time, and was met with a pretty generally positive review. So now we get to this, the plan moving forward and some post-mortem thoughts. Well, as it is with every project, there was no time for a break unfortunately. We had always planned, right from before QA even, to do a patch update on the game in the early days of release, just with things we knew we couldn't fix during QA as it was extremely low priority. So the next few days were dedicated to getting those fixed and some thorough testing to ensure that if we did release a new build to the meta store, it wasn't going to break anyone's game. We got the patch update out, which again was smooth, and now that brings us to today, 1 week on from release and decisions on where to go next. Well, my role over the next few weeks, possibly even months, will be porting the game to PC to get the game released on Steam. It's still extremely early from the release of the game to judge exactly how successful it is, but we would love to get some DLC out with extra content that we have in the backlog as well. Off the bat, I'm going to say in a very unbiased opinion, I actually really enjoy the game. I feel like it's easy enough to pick up for all players, but challenging enough to keep you hooked. There's a pretty surprising amount of content available in the game, from upgrades to characters to abilities and missions, and honestly it's going to take a while to complete it. So if you have that sort of completionist in you, this would definitely be a fun game to sink some time into. However, I'm not a huge fan of virtual reality. I see the appeal, I get the appeal, but I, along with so many people, get pretty bad motion sickness using it. It's been a huge step up in the technological improvements, especially from Quest 2 to Quest 3, which has actually made it a lot easier for me to use, but I still can't find myself using it regularly. The market for this type of game has also been extremely difficult due to the sole fact of being virtual reality. I do think that Meta, Apple, HTC, Sony, they're all in the right direction, and in a few years I can see it popularizing and accessibility improving so much, but for now it's still in that weird space of being good but not perfect yet. It has been really interesting developing for virtual reality, and for as long as I'm on this project, I'll definitely be staying in that space, but I would love to go back to a more organic type of 2D or 3D development style for whatever project I'm working on next. I feel, especially for my own projects, I would 99% of the time opt out of committing to VR. It's a difficult space at the moment, and I feel it heavily limits your own accessibility in the game. Testing becomes difficult, uploads become difficult, functionality requirements become difficult. It's just hard all around. A large portion of this project was also done in a mix of C# and visual scripting through Bolt. And there's definitely pros and cons to both of these, but Bolt's biggest issue is actually tracking problems and where values can go wrong. And for me, a large portion of time during development was spent fixing issues that occurred in Bolt. And oftentimes, whether it's the fault of Bolt or Unity, the nodes would sometimes disconnect or rearrange themselves, which made the testing process so much more painful than it needed to be. This has also been my first official credit on a released game. I've worked on dozens of games over the last few years, but this is the first time I've actually had the pleasure of working in an indie studio and had a commercial game release. I have learned so much over the last year, and there's really so much that I can take away and implement into my own games. But I think the biggest takeaway is actually learning how to scale a game. I got to work very closely with the game designer of Neon Squad Tactics, and seeing the way his mind works and how he's able to scale simple ideas into reusable content is actually really fascinating. For example, the game started with a handful of abilities, and he was able to use and reuse them to create a variation of around 500, all with different functionality. No extra code required, as everything that he needed was set up. All he had to do was change how they worked. Now, this game is by no means the next Elden Ring, but the whole thing for me has been such an amazing learning experience, especially as an early entry point into the industry. And I know no matter what I do or where I go next, whether it's the mistakes I made or the things I have learnt, will be invaluable for every project I work on going forward, in or out of game development. Now, the moment you've been waiting for, I have access to a few promo keys for Neon Squad Tactics, and to enter the giveaway there are 3 requirements. First, make sure you are subscribed to the channel. Trust me, I'll know. Secondly, to be eligible you do need to have either Quest 2, Quest 3 or Quest Pro. And finally, leave a comment down below telling me why you want the game. This can be as simple as maybe you like the graphics, or maybe you're a fan of the genre, or maybe you just want to play a really fun and cool game created by your favorite YouTuber. Me. I will pick 2 people that I think deserve a key, so best of luck. And thanks as always for watching this video. I hope you guys have enjoyed the Neon Squad Tactics journey. There's still going to be a few more videos on this game over the next few months as we wrap up development, so be sure to subscribe to keep up to date when those come out. Thanks again, and take care.